Marine reacts to Warhammer 40k's Space Marine creation. With your guide on becoming an Astartes. Probably still said that wrong. By Luetin09. As always, I'm going to be posting a link to the original video and channel down in the description below. So go ahead and make sure that you check them out. Alright, so real quick, as soon as I finished the previous Warhammer 40k video, as far as Luetin's guide to every single faction, I did realize there was quite a few times that in the races I really didn't get too much information. Just very little basic, to the point where I couldn't really even try to grasp the whole concept, at least of their race. And I have seen a lot of people commenting Bricky's videos. I want to just say that that's going to be coming up here very soon. It's in the top 5 already. So, because I really want to get a really good understanding before I start delving any deeper. And in the meantime, I'm going to be kind of focusing on the Space Marines, just because that's kind of the big thing that's got my interest right now. And also seeing the Imperial Guard, which people have been recommending as well, because I've heard that that's kind of like, I guess you would say, comparable to the military today as far as the Marines. But from what I've been hearing, and obviously I don't know how much of it is true or not, that it's seeming to me that the Imperial Guard might be more of the army, because the army is more, from what I understand. If you are in the army and are watching this video, make sure to comment down below and tell me if I'm wrong or not. From what I understood with the army is that they're attrition of force. Like, they're gonna throw everything they got at you. And this is kind of what the impression I was getting from the Imperial Guard. And Marines, obviously being a lot smaller than the army, are more having to rely on moving towards the enemy or moving under fire. Man, it's been a while since I've been out. I'm forgetting all these terms. Just think of it in terms of that a Marine is supposed to close the distance and repel the enemy's assault with fire in close combat. I got a piece of it back. But in any case, before I get to Bricky's videos is also going to have to most likely be, depending on how things go, I know there's 2 videos, so I might cut each one in half. If I'm able to get a whole video on it out, I will. But again, if that video is longer, it's going to take a lot longer to actually upload. So we'll play that kind of by how it goes. And I don't want to take too much time, because I know this is going to be a slightly longer video, because the video itself is 30 minutes. So it's probably going to be closer to 50 minutes, maybe 55. So let's go ahead and get started. But before we do, don't forget to like, subscribe. It really does help me out a lot. Hit that notification bell right there. That way you get notified every time I do upload. Sometimes I'll upload it twice a day. Typically working on them in the mornings and then releasing them in the late afternoon to late evening. That way when you all get off work, you can enjoy these videos at your leisure. So without further ado, let's go ahead and see what the Space Marine creation process is like. Did the volume cut out?
They shall be my finest warriors, these men who give themselves to me. Like clay I shall mould them, and in the furnace of war I shall forge them. They shall be of iron will and steely sinew. In great armour I shall clad them, and with the mightiest weapons they shall be armed. They will be untouched by plague or disease, no sickness shall blight them. They shall have such tactics, strategies and machines that no foe will best them in battle. They are my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are my Space Marines. And they shall know.
When they say, wait, so is this describing everything that is true about them? Or is it just kind of saying, like, this is what his intentions are, as far as, like, he's going to have them be able to be good at tactics, strategies, working with machines. He's going to make sure that they have no fear. And as far as saying that they're untouched by plague or disease, is that saying that they legitimately can't get sick, or they will do anything they can to help them not get sick? Like, are they immune?
No fear. Space Marines are humanity's most elite fighting force. They're the defenders of civilization, but their immense power is forged through a harsh selection process, extreme genetic and body modifications. This grueling transformation kills many recruits, and those who do survive it are left arguably barely human. The conversion from weak mortal to demi-godlike superhuman is one gifted to only a tiny amount of humans in the 41st millennium. An Astartes, when his transformation is complete, will be stronger, tougher, mentally more powerful by factors than an ordinary human. And while a Space Marine's prime mission is to protect humanity, their physical disparity from ordinary common humans can actually leave many Astartes to look down on these lesser common humans, while others will feel a renewed sense of dedication to protect those who can barely protect themselves.
I guess I could definitely see it both ways. As far as, like, say, if you're the souped up Space Marine, right? And some people, which would probably be my also way of looking at it, like you're seeing people that can't defend themselves in this crazy ass universe, that you would want to, like, help defend them, right? But then again, for some people, and I could understand why they would think, like, especially going through the training that I'm about to see. I like how I always turn my head at the right time when it stops. I lost my train of thought now. As far as, like, those ones who would look down on other people, I could see the reasoning behind it. I just don't agree that that should be a good way to look at it. If you have these capabilities, I would understand the training would be difficult. Your life in and of itself is going to be harsh. But I could definitely understand, but it wouldn't mean that I would agree. And understanding and agreeing are two completely different things, in my opinion, obviously. So, yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
It's important to remember that Space Marines are the defenders of humanity and not the rulers of it. Humans, for better or worse, have been the leaders of the Imperium of Man until recently with the return of Primarch Roboute Guilliman. While the transformation of a human to Space Marine is complex, you'll often hear the terminology of a gene seed be used. Now, a gene seed is not literally a seed, but it is a specific organ that each Astartes carries with seed-like qualities. It's a term used to describe generally the genetic material of an Astartes. It's more accurately the cells and DNA required to engineer a human into an Astartes. The gene seed, more specifically though, refers to the Space Marine's progenoid glands, and the clue is in the name there when you think of progeny. These organs in a Space Marine respond to the other genetic implants they have and replicate DNA. Essentially, they are, in a manner of speaking, an asexual form of reproduction, which is why when a Space Marine is fatally wounded on a battlefield, an apothecary will fight to recover his gene seed. It's also why, yes, Space Marines do not require heterosexual reproduction. 5 years...
So they can't have sex? Or they don't need to? But I wonder if he's going to talk about if this is something that they're given right at the start before they actually start the training to become a Space Marine? Or is this something that they end up earning at the end as soon as they pass all those trials?
Years from implantation, a Space Marine's neck progeny glands can be harvested, but the chest glands won't be harvested up until 10 years. Space Marines essentially depend on themselves to produce new Marines for the chapter. Lastly, in this general sphere of discussion, to answer a very commonly discussed topic, are Space Marines actually castrated? And then, how do they excrete waste? Well, I can't actually recall anywhere in written law this being noted, so if anybody has a specific point of reference, please do link it. But my speculation, based on a few things that I've kind of looked at, is that pretty much the canon opinion is that Space Marines have no sexual drive. However, when it comes to excretion, it's true that their armour is also an environment suit that would cycle and process their own waste, much like a still suit in the Dune universe. Also, Space Marines do not live in their armour, although they may wear it for extended periods of time. It can be removed. It's entirely possible that their external genitals are removed and they have implants to take care of waste, but I've got nothing to see that it points towards this. So it's an unknown, but it's not something that's critically really important in the scheme of things. It's equally possible that it's just seen as an organ as with everything else and they just leave it all be.
Alright, so I mean, that's pretty good to know, because as far as I was seeing these suits, that I wasn't sure if they just wear them the whole time, but he did say that they can take them off and they do get out of them. But then again, depending on their lifestyle, which is obviously going to be going to war a lot, that they would most likely be keeping it on for at least the majority of the time.
Now, before we look further into how a Space Marine is forged in the 41st millennium, let's remind ourselves how they were created over history. Now, the first form of Space Marine was originally created by the Emperor during the Unification Wars of the late 30th millennium. Earth at this time was a barren wasteland of scavengers and barbaric warring tribes after civilization had imploded as a result of the Age of Strife. Earth, being cut off from its supply routes in the warp, cannibalized itself and fell into total anarchy. After the Emperor originally created techno-barbarians, a crude adapted form of super soldier, he would form them later into the Thunder Warriors. These warriors were brutal, powerful, and most importantly, highly unstable. The Emperor knew that he wouldn't be able to work with these soldiers forged in the fires of anarchy beyond the unification of Earth's warring tribes, and so he secretly constructed his genetic facilities in a fortress deep below vast mountain ranges on Earth. Here, he would, with some few remaining gene rights, create his Primarchs using his own genetic material as a template. Then subsequently, the very first of the new breed of warriors, the Space Marines, or Astartes. But what are the Thunder Warriors? Imperial records state that the Thunder Warriors were nearly all wiped out during a particularly bloody battle at the end of the Unification Wars on Mount Ararat. Conveniently, the new Legiones Astartes were created readily to replace them. Now, records from this time are understandably fragmented, but described eyewitness accounts from the few Thunder Warriors to survive this battle, like Eric Tyrannus, stated that it was in fact the Emperor himself who massacred the Thunder Warriors. Others have stated that it was also in collaboration with his custodian guard. In several instances that occurred since this time where Thunder Warriors have appeared and faced their Astartes brothers, the Thunder Warriors have nearly always managed to inflict casualties beyond expectation before they are finally felled. This gives some indication of how powerful they were as warriors and why the Emperor felt they were perhaps too dangerous given their power and psychological instability to function as a disciplined fighting and defensive force for the new Imperium.
Is there a reason why they were so dysfunctional? I don't think I heard it.
Regardless, this whole situation is a dark and little spoken of episode for the Emperor of Man. Vocalizing these events would no doubt have some Inquisition or Ecclesiarchy on their way to you very promptly. With the Thunder Warriors killed in the Battle of Mount Ararat, the new Space Marines, the Legiones Astartes, would come to the fore. Unlike their Thunder Warrior forebears, they would undergo rigorous mental training as well as physical and genetic modifications. This would give them immense physical traits, as well as being near unbreakable with their mental conditioning. The new Marines were initially segregated into 20 legions. This separation was not for simple organizational purposes. Each legion was imbued with genetic traits from their Primarch, and as such this impacted their character and behavior. To ensure unity, the Emperor designated them to stay together in their legions to reduce friction and ensure cohesion of the Astartes brothers. Through recruiting and conquest of human colonies as the Imperium expanded, so did the Astartes legions. What had begun as a handful of Marines swelled to tens of thousands during the Crusades.
It's crazy to really ingrain in the head how big, how strong, how fast these guys would be, as far as just like them just being them. But then again, you throw their armor on, all these augmentations, all these extra organs, but there's still a lot of scary ass things out there that can. I've seen a couple little videos, I think it was in the Orcs one, where they're still getting chopped in half. And damn, it's just one of those things where you can really see that everyone's OP. But when everyone is, no one is.
This would lead later to heavy damage caused during the heresy after the Primarchs holding such immense power being the sole commanders of each Space Marine legion. After that period of chaotic incursion, Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, would draft the Codex Astartes, and the remaining loyalist Primarchs would, after much consideration, agree at best that the Space Marine legions be split into chapters. This was to ensure no Space Marine Legion could wield the sheer weight of power they had during the Crusades and subsequent heresy. This was known as the Second Founding. Each of these chapters would take a permanent homeworld or fortress monastery in the Imperium. The Codex Astartes states that each chapter would be 1,000 battle brothers in number and manage its own recruitment. A specific development in the creation of a Space Marine was discovered after the Horus Heresy.
Wait, it's on recruitment, so is that saying that the process, depending on what planet you're on and what chapters there, the recruitment could be, I mean, obviously it's going to be hard, but it could vary as far as like difficulty, length, etc., etc. As far as just so far as the Space Marines are going right now, it sounds like they're doing all the right things from like a military standpoint.
Weaknesses in the gene seed. Now, as I previously explained, the gene seed is the core biological component in the creation of a Space Marine. During the Heresy, Space Marines were created on a massive scale, and as with any biological replication process, if you do this on a large scale, then mutations and errors can occur in this DNA replication.
You know, something like that it even happens. I'm pretty sure it happens in all military branches, where you would think, or at least I went into the Marine Corps thinking like, hey, if you don't pass certain things in boot camp, you're either going to get kicked out. But then I realized that you don't really get kicked out because they really spent quite a bit of money just getting you there. So they're going to get their 4 years worth because you did sign a contract. And it's actually a long process. So what they do is they recycle you. They'll put you with another platoon that's about 2 weeks behind maybe the one that you're currently at. And they're going to pass you some way, somehow. I mean, unless you absolutely just refuse to train after a certain amount of time. But once they just start forcibly passing everyone, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying I'm some kind of badass or anything like that. Far from it, right? But you definitely start getting people who start, I guess, you want to say that they snuck their way through. And then the quality, in my opinion, obviously does get diminished. But you are getting more Marines, right? Throwing that out there because that kind of reminded me of that similar instance. And again, I'm not trying to say like I'm some gung-ho badass, but, you know, just thought I should point that out because kind of related back to my time in boot camp, where I saw some people that just were unfit, just didn't understand like any of the knowledge, didn't understand just a lot, even after we were about 2/3 of the way like through boot camp, and they were still messing up like how, if they were on like day one. Figured I'd point that out.
So another result of the implementation of the Codex Astartes by Guilliman was to slow the process of creating a Space Marine, to more closely monitor their genetic material and the material implanted within new recruits to ensure purity and expunge defects. Guilliman would also establish core genetic banks on Terra to ensure a stock of genetics existed. These pure sources would provide new material for the foundings of Astartes chapters and also prevent any further contamination. As previously described, each chapter is responsible for its own replenishment. It chooses where and how to locate potential Space Marine candidates. Many will recruit solely from their own homeworld, but others will reach out to hive worlds of the Imperium to locate powerful and resilient fighters who have shown promise and an unnatural ability in combat, even potentially recruiting from gang fighters in hive cities. Feral planets can also be good for selection, as the humans here are physically tough and have to deal with daily hardships more frequently than some other Imperial planets. Surprisingly, less recruits actually appear from the militaristic worlds like fortress planets, maybe because although knowing lives of military discipline, they haven't endured the true horror and hardships that come from the rougher ends of Imperial life. Any candidate for a Space Marine will be usually young, between the ages of 10 and 15 years old. Obviously they need to be strong, healthy and fiercely loyal to the Imperium. Often,
and then obviously I would understand that allows them to grow into the implants that they're going to have later, or the Gen Seed. I would have assumed that they would have gone there from people who were already in the military, but obviously, especially if they know that they're going to be dealing with the, I guess, the dirtier side of things, to put it that way. Like, if you're really having an expectation of what you're thinking it might look like, say, on the other side of the fence, that could be a very big factor in you determining whether or not you would want to go or not. But then again, from people, they were saying they could get recruited from gangs, or just people who are tough, strong, good fighters in between that age. They don't really, more likely than not, they wouldn't really understand like what kind of goes on in the military. So, and also just having that hard life and kind of not having much, and you get the chance to do this, it kind of gives you a way to escape that life. But then again, Astartes life just sounds dreadful, man.
on worlds where recruitment occurs, young male humans who show exceptional skill or strength are pushed hard to give them the best chance of potential recruitment. Candidates can occasionally be as old as 20, but the full effect of their biological conversions may not be as effective or complete. Standard trials for Space Marine recruitment often involve combat, endurance, perhaps hunting of some extremely dangerous indigenous animal, and for the few who survive the tasks set by the Astartes who are there to supervise, the rewards are beyond estimation. It's difficult to describe just how revered Space Marines are to ordinary citizens of the Imperium. While they wouldn't be directly worshipped, they are certainly individuals with godlike reverence and awe. Many humans in the Imperium will go their entire lives without ever even seeing an Astartes, and they may only arrive on an Imperial planet once in a generation. On some worlds they are even somewhat mythical. So for a family on an Imperial world to have their son chosen for Space Marine recruitment and candidacy would be an honour beyond imagination. But from some perspectives, bittersweet, in as all likelihood they may never see them again once they have been accepted, and in very high possibility will probably die in later processes. But it's nonetheless the highest honour to serve the Emperor and the Imperium in this way.
I mean, just seeming from what they would go through and what they're investing in these people, that this seems like if you become a Space Marine, that's going to be a lifetime commitment.
And would no doubt lead to adulation, even possible special treatment for families after the fact. Ordinary citizens understand that to be accepted for the conversion to the Astartes, the Emperor's chosen warriors, is nothing short of becoming a demigod. Then again, you could just as easily have been recruited from a hive world full of daily extreme violence, and your gang was just forcibly made to participate in the trials, and you were simply the only one left alive at the end. So that's your flip side of the coin. Pray you never seek acceptance to the Grey Knights. I'll cover that later. Despite all the physical and mental requirements for candidacy, another element is spiritual purity. In the 41st millennium, Imperial society is heavily religious, worshipping the God Emperor, and most importantly decrying the ruinous powers of chaos. Chaplains and the ecclesiarchy will continually monitor society around Astartes' recruitment sources to ensure that there are no signs of taint by the dark forces of chaos. With the easy part over, the selected candidates, now known as aspirants, will begin the ritual process of becoming a Space Marine. This may be a formal process of reciting scripture, or it could involve further trials. These could take place on the homeworld or result in immediate departure for the aspirant. Each chapter has their own private and guarded initiations. Some of these can be heavily traumatic and are usually significantly harder tests designed to break those who show even the smallest cracks of weakness. These trials for the young aspirants may even include ritual slaughter, scarification, even amputation and bloodletting. It's all designed to prove their commitment, loyalty and unwavering faith in the Astartes chapter. Unsurprisingly, some aspirants do not pass this phase of testing physically or mentally. Aspirants will continue periods of testing and examination as well as actual live combat during their period as a recruit for the Space Marine chapter. And some of these trials may be cleverly disguised as coming of age rituals, other celebrations some more combat based. All though will be observed carefully by senior members of the chapter and chaplains who will be assessing key traits and behaviours, looking for candidates who fulfill their exacting requirements. Some of these aspirants from Feral worlds or even other worlds may not be truly aware of what Space Marines are, and this innocence may in some way protect them from making overthought errors that cost them later. Still, some chapters actually take little interest in these early stages and will only actually become involved later once aspirants have been further thinned down. The whole process is a physical and psychological minefield. Some challenges could be unachievable, while others the simple act of survival is enough to merit approval to progress to the next stage. All the tests put to Space Marine aspirants are designed to test every element of their being to the limit and expose any weaknesses that are present, as well as learn about how they handle and make judgments on situations they are presented with. While the recruitment age for these aspirants is undoubtedly young, it's worth remembering that the nightmare environment of the 41st millennium is undoubtedly very harsh, and so growing up and becoming an adult quickly is something which many learn to do, and so their age shouldn't necessarily dictate your judgment of them based on our current period in time.
Because I remember I said before that I would definitely want to be a Space Marine, but not after hearing this, especially at my age. I'm a little too old, so I wouldn't be able to get the actual full benefit of the augmentations. The trials, though, I wonder if we're going to get into detail as to what they actually do, because they did talk about hunting indigenous creatures, talked about fighting, cutting, amputation, and it seemed like a lot of that, I mean, obviously it would be physically, but it seems like a lot of it was also like more mentally focused. That it seemed, because they're really trying to, I guess, build that iron will.
Standard Astartes trials for these young recruits can include knowledge of self. Astartes look at recruits' mental strength equally to the physical. The horrors they will face in their lives as a Space Marine, despite later conditioning, require the strongest character in a recruit to be successful and worthy. They may use a chapter librarian to impose psychic horrors on a recruit to see if they survive the nightmares they're forced to witness. He may be forced to take drugs and face the worst parts of his own psyche. The stress and trauma of this trial can often physically affect their bodies as well, so in many ways this becomes the ultimate test for recruits. Completion of this trial will undoubtedly fundamentally alter the young recruit forever. Some chapters, like the Imperial Fists, consider this kind of mental testing especially important, but do so by exposing their recruits to literal physical pain, and we use devices like the subtly titled pain glove. These hook into the nervous system of the recruit and inflict horrific pain, but also maintain their consciousness well past what a normal individual could handle. The result will either be a mentally toughened but probably scarred individual, or a complete mental breakdown and death. An obvious and standard test for many recruits is exposure. Most worlds of the Imperium have unforgiving environments, and so sending out recruits into these wastes with little to survive with is an easy way to tell who is strong enough as a candidate. Space Marine apothecaries can rebuild damaged individuals, so the test is less of can you survive without consequences, and more simply, can you survive? Many worlds are severely irradiated, frozen wastes, toxic wastelands, or ashen wastes, where planets have suffered total ecological collapse. Alternately, a planet could also be a literal jungle full of horrific creatures, small and large, ready to tear you to pieces or just melt your face off. As stated, the test is simple: survive for a set period of time. It will also likely involve some object of crossing a distance from A to B, so as to avoid recruits just digging a hole somewhere and sitting in it until time has elapsed. Some of the tests could well be impossible to complete and are simply assessing who can survive longest or travel furthest before dying or near death.
They're really hammering that whole surviving mentality. I believe the quote was that you're not going to know how strong you are until being strong is your only option. Or the whole thing about like an animal, right? Even if an animal is smaller than you, and obviously you could, like, to put it nicely, like, crush it. I mean, damn, that's a bad way to look at it. But you know what I mean. If you have it cornered though, and if it's got nowhere to go, and if it kind of really has a feeling that it would die, it's gonna try to attack back, right? So I guess they're really trying to drive that in as far as their mentality goes.
The Ultramarines and Space Wolf chapters are known to favour exposure testing. A fairly self-explanatory trial, recruits are pitted against one another in one-on-one combat. When the last few remain, the assessing Astartes will usually halt the assessment. The type of duel could vary between armed or unarmed combat, consecutive combat, or recruits switching out on completing rounds. There is one constant though, and that is it's always a fight to the death. Again, apothecaries are able to heal most ordinary human wounds with ease, so these fights are often fairly no-holds-barred brutal affairs. Amputation and heavy trauma being the norm. Unsurprisingly, duels are the Blood Angels trial of choice, but others such as Dark Angels, Imperial Fists and Space Wolves also put this trial to their recruits. War is life in the Imperium, and although some worlds know this more than others, planets used for recruitment usually have some form of regular combat going on. This trial is less a trial and more a means of assessing potential candidates. Astartes may have observed headhunting particularly strong champions, or they may watch them from orbit, observing infighting between tribes on Imperial feral worlds. In this trial, recruits are tasked to head out into their homeworld and slay a beast for causing chaos or harm to their world. Many Imperial worlds host highly dangerous life forms or worse, orc infestations. The recruit must go out alone, or sometimes in small groups, and return with their captured hunt, often alive. With these group hunts though, the nasty twist is that there can only be one successful recruit, so they could turn on each other, break off alone to achieve or steal victory. I personally question the validity of this test. Fighting to the death to show strength over others seems plausible, but setting out in as a group, but then betraying other recruits seems to go kind of against the traits Astartes look for in recruits.
That's literally exactly what I was thinking right now. Because when you're a Space Marine, or like when you're in an organization, right, you're never gonna, it's always a bad idea in my mind. I mean, sure, is there going to be some infighting? Yeah. But if you're doing it in a situation where you would actually kill or can kill someone else on your team or whatever you want to call it, that defeats the whole purpose of teamwork. And how much, because I mean, obviously one Space Marine isn't going out to on some kind of mission. I mean, unless it's a video game probably. But there's always a group, right? You're never really going in by yourself. So I was thinking that too. So I agree with him. And at no point right now, they haven't gotten any argumentation. Like, they're still who they are when they were recruited, right? Because if they are, then it got to be some kind of mental toughness, man, that I personally would not have.
Anyway, on returning home, they'll be required to slay their successful hunt in a ritual in front of their community before being led successfully away in the throes of glory. Lastly, the quite vague challenge trial. And this is exactly what it is, some form of probably unsurmountable challenge. This could be to attempt to fight a full-blown Space Marine in combat. An impossible task, you might imagine, but usually remember this is the 41st millennium and bizarre occurrences are abound. While the thought of a child fighting a Space Marine seems insane, remember the task is usually to see how they approach it, not necessarily their success.
Okay, so a lot of this is more just on how their initial response is going to be. Because obviously a kid's not going to be able to defeat a Space Marine. But, I wonder what kind of approaches, or like which ones were really unique as far as like what they did when they were asked this. I feel like most at this point would probably just give it a shot.
In some extremely rare situations though, the aspirant may actually beat the Space Marine challenger. As completely impossible as this may seem, that individual usually will hold some unusual or rare power and will go on to become a legendary hero of the chapter. The aspirant will also usually be armed, while the Space Marine unarmed and without his power armor. Still, as with most of the former trials, the test here is really about if they can just survive at all, not so much best their opponent.
Okay, thank you, because I was thinking that, shit, if they're in the armor, and this person is going to be like, no armor, no augmentations yet, or like no Gen Seed, that it's going to be very one-sided, but obviously the person is armed, the Space Marine doesn't have the armor, and it's more about surviving than really hitting that survival.
Other arguably more horrific tests though could be non-combat based and test a recruit's strength, speed, mental skill or resistance to toxins. So they might for example be forced to drink nightmarish toxic chemicals, lift weights so heavy they break their bones apart, or evade some kind of horrific dangerous trap. Recruits deemed to have succeeded by whatever standards, however unlikely, will then be restored by chapter apothecaries. Ultramarines and again Imperial Fists favour these trials. Clearly, a great many recruits will not survive this stage of assessment, but even those who fail to be accepted but by some miracle survive will usually be heavily respected for having done so, not just by their families and friends, but by the assessing Astartes. Having done no wrong but maybe just not made the cut, these surviving but unsuccessful aspirants who were assessed on their home world may return to their former communities, a rare occurrence. Or they may continue on to serve the chapter as a serf, a menial but loyal servant who takes personal care of, say, a marine's armour and weaponry. Those returned to their homes are extremely few, but surprisingly are not perceived as failures. It would be made clear to all that having just survived, they have shown sheer strength and integrity as an Imperial citizen. They would then likely go on to become a strong leader for that world as Imperial Guard, Planetary Defense Force, or some other leadership. Successful aspirants will now become neophytes. They will move on to the next stage, where they'll begin the early stages of conversion to a full Space Marine. With
the one per aspirant, the first stage. I didn't really get a timeline as to how long that lasts, but I would assume maybe a year, maybe longer.
The initial implantation of the gene seed and chemical adaptation of their genetically enhanced organs. This could mean immediate departure with a Space Marine brother to the next phase, or it may be that they are allowed to celebrate in their home community before departure. A very huge moral boost for the Imperial community there, and also to help reinforce Imperial values and loyalty. To be able to say your community gained a successful Astartes recruit is no small thing, and statues, paintings, songs and stories will be told for many years, if not generations to come. Neophytes will be expected to engage in training for combat as well as other mental training, as well as following chapter lore. If a neophyte should break chapter lore through ignorance or unthinkably by deliberately doing so, they will expect severe punishments. A neophyte breaking chapter lore will not simply be thrown out, they would likely be mind scrubbed, live out their lives as either, best case scenario, chapter serfs, being menial servants, or worse, forcible amputation and body conversion to life as cybernetic drones and slaves as servitors. Successful neophytes immediately will begin conditioning to be implanted with their gene seeds and relevant genetic enhancements. Space Marines must be male because the gene seed is only compatible with male hormones and genetics, so no, you won't see female Space Marines. The neophytes also need to be tested for compatibility. I'm always kind of surprised that this doesn't happen before the recruitment trials, but anyway, so they're tested for compatibility otherwise as with organ transplants.
So if they're not compatible, then you just kind of went through all that training for nothing. Or maybe you just have like a dumbed down version of it, like it's not going to be as strong or powerful. So I completely agree with them that they should do this in the beginning, because otherwise you're doing a lot of that for nothing. And also, on the Space Marine side of things, you also just spend a lot of time trying to train this person and kind of just wasted it.
Rejection would be fatal for the neophyte. Even with this testing, it can still happen later down the line. They will then further have their mental strength checked before implantation of the gene seed begins, to ensure that they are in no way compromised by the forces of chaos. If all these criteria are approved, the neophyte recruit will now become a Space Marine scout, or in some cases a full Space Marine initiate. They will live isolated in the Space Marine chapter's fortress monastery on the homeworld, save for any approved missions. The individual will be tutored on battle methods, tactics, psycho-conditioning, values, and the history of his chapter. The reason these early Marines are titled initiates is because it is still unknown as to whether they will even survive to the final end process of becoming a full battle brother. 19 organs grown from the chapter gene seed will be implanted to the neophyte initiate. Some are transplants and others are grown in the trainee Marine's body. The gene seed will also adapt and change and grow the individual's body to become the giant size of a Space Marine, towering over ordinary mortal humans. Much of the body chemistry will be fundamentally reworked during this time, and the gene seed contains genetically engineered viral machines which rebuild the body to the template created by the Emperor. Any implant has a potential to fail, and this rejection will automatically end and probably kill the initiate. As if the odds weren't stacked against them already, this further thins down the number who survive to the end of this arduous process. In brief, the 19 implanted or grown organs to become a full Space Marine are as follows. a secondary heart to increase blood supply and capacity. It can also pump steroids and extra adrenaline for battle situations. The os modular or iron heart, this strengthens and grows the skeleton of a space marine so that his bones will contain a ceramic based mineral which is added to an initiate's diet. After a few years, the Space Marine skeleton will be exponentially stronger than a normal human. The ribcage will have become fused to a solid bone plate, providing extra protection for internal organs. The biscopia is implanted within the chest cavity, and this increases skeletal muscular development, essentially muscle density. The hemastomen assists in carrying oxygen and nutrients more efficiently throughout the blood. It also assists in regulating the second and third implants. The Larraman's organ is also placed in the chest and manufactures synthetic Larraman cells. These serve like ordinary human blood platelets but faster and more efficient. When a Space Marine is wounded, they form fully healed scar tissue in seconds, preventing hemorrhaging. This ability can make Space Marines appear invincible as they take wound after wound. Anything other than the most catastrophic of injuries is going to leave them still standing. The catalepsian node is implanted in the back of the cerebrum. It allows Space Marines to avoid the need for sleep, entering them into a form of ongoing coma, allowing their brain the ability to systematically recharge by individual parts at a time. This enables them to stay on duty for hundreds of hours. The seventh implant is the...
I'm pretty sure any military member would greatly appreciate something like that if you stood post a lot.
Preomnor. It functions as a decontamination chamber above the stomach and will analyze ingested materials, neutralizing any organic or inorganic toxins. It also enables the Astartes to eat materials for sustenance that would kill ordinary humans. The omophagia is implanted in the upper spinal cord. It absorbs information through ingested DNA and RNA related to memories. The purpose is to gain tactical or survival information by eating animals or life forms indigenous on a planet. In addition to a second heart, Space Marines also have multi-lungs as their ninth implant. 3 in fact. This is to give them extra oxygen absorption in thin air environments. In a toxic environment, their ordinary lungs are shut off to allow the third lung to act as a filter for any necessary toxins. The 10th adaptation is the ocular lobe. It's a gene seed adaptation that enhances eyesight along the optic nerves. This gives increased accuracy of vision and increased low light sight ability. Lyman's ear is not simply better for more accurate hearing, it enables Marines to resist ordinary human dizziness and for them to be able to filter out white noise and sonic attacks. The Sasan membrane allows a Space Marine to enter a state of suspended animation. This can enable mortally wounded Marines to survive until help or an apothecary's arrival. This hibernation period has been known to be able to last for anything as long as half a century. Melanochrome alters the pigments in the skin cells, allowing an Astartes to shield himself from dangerous radiation and heat. Different levels of this in effect can cause physical differences between chapters, such as the very pale skin of the Blood Angels or the darker skin of the Salamanders. The oolitic kidney filters blood to further remove toxins that have been ingested in combination with the 7th organ. It is best not to think of this though like an ordinary kidney, as this organ functions to assist in removing toxins before they have passed through any normal process of absorption. Otherwise, it wouldn't be very useful. It also helps to regulate the advanced circulatory system and other organs. The neuroglottis in the mouth allows a Marine to biochemically analyse things by taste or smell, or determine if something is poisonous or safe. Despite their advanced organs, this could still be very useful for a variety of purposes, and it can also enable them to track targets, much like a canine. The muconoid is implanted in the nervous system and, if activated through an external treatment, will cause the Astartes skin to secrete a waxy substance. This will cocoon them to protect them in situations of extended suspended animation, even the vacuum of space or other temperature extremes. The Betcher's gland consists of 2 glands implanted in the mouth. These allow the Astartes to use their saliva as a corrosive acid when consciously activated. This could enable them to corrode bars if they were held captive or remove doors from their hinges. It also can assist them in eating difficult to break down substances. Some Marine chapters have found that this organ no longer functions or has become less effective over time. The progenoid glands, or the gene seeds, are the critical organs of a Space Marine. They're implanted into the neck and chest cavity and serve as reproductive glands to allow their DNA to be collected upon death and safeguard the continuity of the chapter. Apothecaries of a Space Marine chapter will cultivate germ cells from the progenoid glands to create the 19 organs of a Space Marine, or some of them, because some are grown within the Space Marine themselves. The final organ is the black carapace, otherwise called the interface. This material is implanted under the skin of the chest with the now shell-like ribcage. Fibred bundles then grow inward and interlink with the Space Marine's nervous system. Points for these bundles are pre-cut by apothecaries and form neural connection points. The function of these are to allow a Space Marine to interface with the heavy power armor, or as some would have you believe, the armor's machine spirit.
The fact that people have gone to such detail that it makes me think, like, could this be possible if someone just knew how to do all that? I don't know. But then again, it does deal with the I keep saying Gen Z. It does have to deal with, like, the Emperor's own DNA, right? And to see, it was seeing if it was compatible. But just the amount of sheer detail, I don't know, it's just insane.
These connections enables faster reaction and maneuverability. Without this, Space Marines would lumber around very much encumbered by the heavy armor they wear. It's worth remembering that this whole process probably sounds heavily traumatic, but consider that it ideally happens when the young neophyte initiates between the ages of about 10 to 12 years old and should be then completed by age 18. Many are going to...
Finally got it. So 8 to 10 to 12, and then finish by age 18. Just to finally start as a Space Marine.
Suffer critical or multiple organ failure during the process. The penalty, or arguably mercy for this, is usually euthanasia, although conversion to a servitor for the chapter is sometimes an option depending on chapters and their needs. Again, for those families who never see their sons again, in some cases it's probably for the best. All they need to know is he's serving the Imperium. Now, more recently, since the involvement of Belisarius' call of the Mechanicum, Primaris Marines are a new breed of superhuman Astartes. Under instruction from Robert Guilliman, Primaris Astartes are only created from the gene seeds of loyalist Primarchs. They contain 3 additional organs, and their gene seed is considerably more genetically stable. Guilliman had instructed Call to develop these new organs with the goal of creating the Primaris, and their additional organs are the SINEW coils. This enables the sinew of a Primaris Astartes to be durametallic, contracting with immense force, gifting them extreme strength and his body further resilience. This increased strength will literally enable them to crush the skulls of their enemies with bare hands. The magnifact, and this small lobe is inserted to the brain cortex. It secretes a hormone to increase the body's growth functions, with the goal of also intensifying further functions of the other implanted organs. Apparently, this organ is in fact half of the immortis gland, the godmaker gland of the Primarchs. For undisclosed reasons, Call was only able to discover the right half of this gland, not the full gland itself. The left half had been fully eradicated from Imperial records by either the Emperor himself or others unknown. And third, the Belisarian furnace. This organ lies dormant and connects to both a Marine's hearts. In times of immense physical stresses, it expels chemicals simulating combat stimulants, increasing the regrowth of tissue, bone and muscle. This is a short-term use organ and requires time to recharge after using. Now, if this incredibly harrowing physical conversion is successful, the neophyte or initiate will have completed the arguably most challenging part of his transformation. However, during these changes, they will still be undergoing some of the most challenging training and assessment regimes humanity had ever known. Psychological and physical conditioning, subconscious therapy, and endless live battle training sessions. Their senses and mental abilities far exceed ordinary humans by the end of this process. Their mental toughness is beyond measure, and an Astartes will essentially ignore pain and environmental conditions. An Astartes will assault enemies who, to simply look upon, would make an ordinary human suffer a complete mental break. Many, through endless conditioning, will develop photographic memories. Much of this round-the-clock therapy will also neutralize any latent character flaws and create stable, highly single-minded warriors. This endless mental and physical indoctrination will also teach and reinforce high respect for authority and to expertly carry out orders. With that said, it's important to remember that Space Marines are not mindless drones or clones. They are individuals, and while always following the rule of command, if a situation warrants it, they are entirely capable of disobeying orders if they believe it to be ultimately necessary.
Interesting. So, I mean, I have been told that they do have their own types of personality, or like they're not completely just like robotic in the way that they think. They still have like their own personality and stuff. I mean, it's still human, right?
Consequences for this, though, could be, and usually are, potentially highly severe. At the end of this process, the few successful young children who are pitted against one another and survive the ordeals to reach this point will be welcomed as successful young initiates, becoming full Space Marine battle brothers, Imperial Astartes, the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Astartes' aging, though, does seem somewhat random, with some living even as long as 10,000 years. But given the fractured and strange nature of time in the 41st millennium, it can be really hard to put accurate expectancies on this, and many Marines who are not killed may reach at least half a century in age. It's no exaggeration to state that on successfully becoming an Astartes, these men would be far from what you would recognise as human. Their extended lives and nearly unbreakable bodies are truly no prize. Their lives from this point on are spent in the sole act of defending humanity and the Imperium of man. Accepting that their lives will be lost in battle at some point in the future, probably in horrific circumstances, they'll never see anyone they had ever known in their lives again. Families, friends will die far before they even begin to think of such things. Space Marines are the protectors. Humanity in the 41st millennium stands on a precipice. We've known many horrors, disasters, and catastrophes, the ending of many worlds, but the next millennia will be the most critical. Threats surround humanity, some still difficult to gauge just how severe and if we can resist them. Our hope is in the Astartes, and the Imperium of Man, and the Emperor. With the Primarch Rubik Guilliman returned, there is a glimmer of hope in the darkness.
Alright, let's talk about that for just a minute, just because this is going to be a very long video, and I'm really hoping I can get it out today on the 28th. But if it doesn't, it's probably just going to come out a little bit after 12. Once again, I tried to get everything out that I was going to say in the video, because I knew I wasn't going to remember a whole lot of it at the end. So, and also just some of the things that I really didn't hear was that, and how many groups, like what's typical group of people that they usually take in, like, I mean, I'm assuming they would take quite a bit. You could say like 1,000 people that they'll take in, and then it just starts getting weeded down until the point that they actually become Space Marines. I'm wondering, like, what's like the average rate of people actually becoming them? Like, is it only every 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 100, etc., etc.? And as far as just the people in general who would go through this training, they're on a whole nother level of mental fortitude. Damn, I honestly don't think anybody, in terms of speaking like in today's world, I don't think there's anyone who would be able to survive that type of training, let alone actually go through that surgery process, which I heard that they're conscious during it. But I did like the fact that when he was going through the transplants that they were going to be going through, that he actually went to detail as to what each one is, how long it takes, and also what the function of each one does, which brings me back to my initial intention of me if I would want to become a Space Marine, I would want to be one just to get all those benefits as far as like physical and mental, but I don't believe I would be able to get it, because I feel like I would pretty much die within that initial training, or at a certain point I would probably just give up, and at that point I'd be like, fuck it, I tried that. Which also brings me to one more last thing. I wonder if anybody has ever gone through the process of becoming a Space Marine, or not becoming a Space Marine, but getting all their surgeries, but like in a black market kind of style. Like, has anybody ever done this? Like, maybe somebody leaked out how to do it, or someone has like a agency, right, and they gave it to someone who paid like a lot of money, and you just see this big dude, all these implants. that would look like a Space Marine but wouldn't be one, but he still got those augmentations. I wonder if there's any like shady things like that have happened, and Space Marines come in, they kill them, and then take the Gen Seed back. I wonder if anything like that has happened like under the table. But that's gonna go ahead and do it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, really does help me out a lot. Dislike if you didn't like, helps me improve the channel. If you're curious to see what's coming up next, check the description down below. You're gonna see a list of about 5. From top to bottom, it's gonna be how I view them. This is a long video, really hoping it comes out today. But until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.